Hi, I'm Sam and welcome to this video on how to customize a chat box for your site. In this video, we are going to take the lessons we learned from the form series, which you can check out in the link in the top right hand corner, as well as in the description. And we're going to apply that to our site. In this case, the Into the Wild demo site, where we're going to take check boxes that look like this and convert them into this. Now, if you don't like this design, that's absolutely fine. The technique we're going to show you here means you can make your checkbox as wild and wacky or as elegant as you like. So let's get into it. Time for the standard housekeeping before we start. So feel free to skip this bit if you want to and jump to the timestamp on the screen right now or the chapters in the descriptions if you want to get straight into the action. So if you didn't already know, this video is part of the Into the Wild Easy Build series. If you haven't watched the other videos, it might be a good idea to do so, and a link to the series should be appearing about now. If you're completely new to this channel but want to have the same setup as me, then please look at the Getting Started series link showing up again round about now. That will sort you out with the local web server and the pen drive applications that I use, so you've got the exactly same experience as me. If you don't want to do that, that's absolutely fine. You didn't hurt my feelings. Well, maybe just a little bit. I've still got you covered. The link to the resources that you're going to need to use to follow along in this video are in the description below, which are just the site files. Of course, you don't need to use the site files if you don't want to. You can just follow along the code on your own pages that you've made before. However, if you have followed along and have done all my previous videos, including the last video, then you have all of the files that you're going to need already. Although there is a small little vector graphics that you could use in a final little tidbit at the end of this video. So you can get that from the description link. So let's just do a quick overview of our form. We did some customizations a few videos back, however there are still a couple of issues. The first one, as you probably already know, the ability to actually customize checkboxes themselves is very poor and limited. And in the end, the Chrome checkboxes we see here completely breaks the color coding system that I'm using on the site, which is white, greens, black and yellow. And although it's not ugly, it just does not fit in with the style of the website. And then we have the second problem where this does not work the same across all browsers. For example, this is what we've got in Opera. Okay, this is what we have in Edge. This is what we have in Firefox. And well, let's be honest, Internet Explorer 11, that's not even really worth talking about, is it? The whole site is not supported. So if customization doesn't work, then what's the point in this video? That's because we can do some hacky stuff to make it look like we've got checkboxes working. And that's exactly what we're going to do. The first thing we need to do is to modify the HTML in our checkboxes. So this is the layout that we had before, and we need to change it from this and convert them to this. So although the layout is quite different, there isn't really a huge amount of things that have changed. We've essentially added a wrapper around each group of input and checkboxes with the class of form check group. And we've also added a span tag here with a class of form fake check with inside of the label. And then all I've done is just format it a bit so it looks, in my opinion, a bit easier to see and understand. However, this HTML on its own makes no impact on the actual page itself. And we'll check this by saving the file and then viewing it. So here's our file. We reload it here and we check it and we can see it is exactly the same. No changes at all. The reason why is, well, the magic always seems to happen in the CSS, and that's where we're going next. The first thing we're going to do seems minor, but it is actually quite important, and that is to set the check group, okay, that wrapper that we made, and put it as position relative. The reason for this is that it allows us then to set all of the children inside it with position absolute, so we can move them around exactly where we want them to. The next thing we're going to need to do is to actually hide the current checkbox. Because we're not actually going to be using that checkbox, we need to hide it. And so it should come to no surprise to you that this is a code that we are using. Remember that display none removes the element from the document flow as well as making it invisible. And so we'll do a quick save and check that. And here we can see that the checkbox themselves are now actually missing. I can see that the text is looking a bit bunched up, but again, we won't worry about that until after we've got our checkboxes sorted out, and then we'll deal with that. Which means that we've got to start to actually create the checkbox. So the first thing we're going to do is create the outer border first. And we're going to do that by manipulating that form fake check, that span that we added within the label. And this is the code that we need. As we can see, it is nice and easy. In case you're wondering, most of these values were created by trial and error. The width and height value, the border, and even this minus 0.1 of a rem, which is just to get it exactly where I felt it looked better. Again, your mileage may vary, and I always recommend that you experiment. So go forth and experiment, I suppose. I don't know. Next is to create the check mark itself. There are many ways we could do this, but the best way is using the pseudo after element, and we have used this previously in the videos, so you should know what I'm on about. So what does that CSS code look like? Well, I say it looks like this. And we can see we've got the empty content again, position absolute, display block. And once again, these height and width values were completely done by trial and error until I got it the way that I wanted it to. Just over 50% seems to work for me. I did originally try it with just 1 or 2 pixels different, and it just didn't look right for me, not in this particular style. Now, what may look a bit confusing here is in fact the positioning values. So let's see if I can explain this to you in a way that makes sense. The positioning of the actual check bits are based on the position of the sort of semi-parent, the form fake check. So setting the position of top and left of 50% essentially moves it into the middle of the checkbox. However, this applies to the top left corner of the tick and not the center, which is why then we have to use the transform to translate it back into the center. In other words, the positioning gets the top left hand corner of the element to the center based on the size and dimensions of the check border, but that applies, like I said, to the top left hand corner, and therefore we need to use its own width and height values in order to center it correctly. And now we have the funky rule. And here it is. And I appreciate for you guys, this is a doozy of a rule, especially if you are new to CSS. So I will do my best to explain it to you. Now, first thing first, as I'm sure you're aware, this is thrown out the BEM method completely out the window. Okay, but there's no other way around it. As you can see, I've brought up both pages side by side, the HTML and the CSS, in a hope that this will make it easier to understand. The first bit we have is this here, which is form input check checked. This is referring to the original checkbox that we have actually hidden and seen if it has been ticked or checked. Now, I know what you're thinking. I quite fancy some fried chicken too. Oh, sorry. If it's about the code, it is more likely that you're thinking that the real checkbox is disabled because we put it display as none, but it isn't. See, although the checkbox display is set to none, it can still be operated via the text in the label. Both the checkbox and its label are intertwined. If you've never noticed this before, this is true on all text boxes. You can actually check the checkbox by clicking on the text as well as the box itself. Try it out if you don't believe me, and we're glad it does do that because our entire technique is based on that. So just to reiterate, we are checking to see if the actual hidden checkbox has been checked, okay, which they would have done by clicking on the label. Then we have this unusual rule here. The plus sign is a immediate sibling. So it's basically saying, is there this thing right next to it? Which it is, because that is actually the label. Then we have the greater than symbol, which basically says a direct child. So in other words, a child of the label, and it must have a class of form fake check. which is exactly what we have here. However, we're then looking at the after attribute, and then we're setting that to 1. I fully appreciate this can be a bit of a mind bender, especially when you're first doing this. And although I've actually gone through this forwards, I personally find it, and I find a lot of other people do, find it easier to understand when we look at it going backward. So let's look at it that way. We are basically saying set the opacity of an element to 1. That element is form fake check after. However, the condition for this to be set to 1 is that it must be a direct child of something of a form label check, which itself must also be a direct sibling, in other words, next door to a element with a form input check, which is also in the state of checked. And that is the condition in which this form fake check after will have its opacity set to 1. In other words, making it visible. See, I think it's easier that way round. What do you think? Well, I'll tell you what, I've got loads of comments that no one's writing in, so please put it in the comments, tell me which way you actually find it easier. Because if you find it easier doing it the reverse way, I'll make sure that my future videos, I will explain it that way to make it easier. And believe it or not, that's the whole code. So let us save it and see what happens. So we do a refresh and yeah, that's well, it's kind of working. It just looks a bit messy, but not a problem. That's an easy fix to do. So let's just do that very quickly. So the first little change we're going to do is to give the whole group itself a left of 15 rem. That's just to move it over to the left a little bit. And then we need to move the text a little bit further on. So here we are in the form label check. And as you can see, we've just added some margins just to separate it from each other. So again, another save and a refresh. And there we have it exactly as we like it. Okay, absolutely lovely. So what does it look like on the other browsers? Well, let's have a look. So let's go back to the start with Opera. Okay, see we've got the old one. Let's refresh it. And okay, sometimes we need to do that Control F5 to force a refresh. And there we have it, lovely. Let's go to Edge. Let's force up refresh. Again, lovely. Unfortunately, not everything works to plan, because when we look at Firefox, it's off-center. Well done, Firefox. The want to break the rules. Well, not only one, because although Edge worked nicely for us, do you remember Internet Explorer? Well, we completely break it on Internet Explorer. So I'm really glad this browser has died of death. So as a final tidbit, like I said, this doesn't have to be this. Okay, what goes in the middle can be anything you want to. And just to make a point on that, here we have our fake checkbox after, and you can, for example, add an image. So I'm just going to quickly add an image here. We can save that, go back to our browser, force a refresh, and you can see we get the tick box. It can be an image, it can be whatever you want. You can make a really funky SVG image, you can use a JPEG, you can use writing, whatever you like. And what's nice about doing this with the SVG, again, is that I think it is supported across all the browsers, even if it's a bit wonky on our old friend Firefox. But you can see it works on the others perfectly, at least the important major ones. I hope Safari does the same thing, but Safari doesn't support Windows anymore, so I can't help you on that. And this means my work here is done. So thank you for staying with me all the way. If there's a video you want me to do, or you want to ask me anything, please whack it in the comments below. I do read every single comment that people put. And as I've said before, if you've enjoyed this video, if you found it useful, please like this video and consider subscribing. Every single like, every single subscription really helps to promote this channel. That's the end of it. Well, I am Sam. This is me. Whatever you want. I'm signing off. See you guys next time.